If they asked me, I could write a book about the way you walk and whisper and look.
Joining us now in our Book Talk segment, great to welcome the New York Times best-selling author of a previous book called A Dirty Job. This is kind of a sequel to it. It's called Secondhand Souls. We're joined today by Christopher Moore from out in San Francisco. And Chris, good to talk with you. How are you today?
I'm very good. And yourself, Doug?
I'm doing great. Good to have a chance to chat with you for a couple of minutes. Now, when I interview authors of novels, I don't like to give too much away, so I'm not going to do that. But you write about some interesting things in the book here. How much of this book is a direct sequel to the previous book, and how much is new?
Well, the premise of the first book was that there's sort of a beta male hypochondriac guy who gets the job of being deaf, and he runs it out of a secondhand store in San Francisco where the souls of the deaf transfer from one person to another through, like, thrift store objects. And so that mythology sort of gets up and running in A Dirty Job. By the time you get into Secondhand Souls, all the plates are spinning and all the weird stuff is going on with these different secondhand stores, whether it's records or books, that are moving the souls of humans from one body to another, and then they just start going missing.
It's a great premise. Yeah, you said it's a great premise. Reading through it, but I didn't want to give too much away because the characters are very, very vivid, very, very unusual too. So you've created an interesting world in these, at least these two books.
Well, thank you so much. A lot of it I draw on different myths from different cultures. I have the Celtic goddesses of the battlefield, and Egyptian goddesses are gods of the underworld, and there's a lot of Buddhist theology in there because of the transference of souls and so forth. And then there's just some good old ghost stories and some baseball and a lot of San Francisco history that's thrown in that's told by different ghosts of the Golden Gate Bridge. I don't think we're giving any spoilers there because you just have to tell people, okay, it's going to be a little weird. Hang on.
Well, yeah. You talk about San Francisco. That is a city filled with interesting characters. I grew up in New York. I thought New York had interesting characters till I read about a lot of San Francisco. So I think you may overtake New York in that.
Well, I've drawn on all of history, too. I've had a character running through my San Francisco books called the Emperor, who's based on Emperor Norton, who was a guy who declared himself Emperor of San Francisco, Protector of Mexico in the 1860s. And this guy's been so persistent through the years. Mark Twain had him in Huckleberry Finn as a character called the King. And his dogs that I have in the modern day, in Bummer and Lazarus, Mark Twain ended up writing the obituary for Bummer. So the weird characters is you can kind of condense them when you have 150 years of history to draw on and put them in. I think you could do it with pretty much any city.
And again, for those folks that maybe not have read the previous book, again, it deals with metaphysics, religion, and all kinds of things, but there's a lot of humor in it as well, right? I mean, you write a very funny book.
Right. The whole point was I asked myself with the first one, can I write a comedy about death? And I had just taken care of my mother. She was dying of cancer, and then my wife's mother, she was dying of cancer. I thought maybe I know something about this. Maybe I've watched people around it, and maybe I have something to say and can lighten it up a little bit. And because what I do is write comedy, but it was also a challenge. And I think all the books are. Their first object is to make you laugh and to have a good time. And if I can sort of defang some of these darker monsters in our lives, these things that scare us or intimidate us or make us shy away, all the better. But the main thing is to entertain people and enjoy the journey with the characters.
And dark humor, when it's done well, is some of the funniest humor there is out there. I mean, if it's done right, that's the greatest type of humor, I think.
Well, it's one that it's a coping mechanism, I think.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, my dad was a highway patrolman, so a bad day at the office might mean that, he had to pull someone, out of a car who had a fatal accident and so forth. And that came to the dinner table. So people, emergency workers and so forth, have developed this defensive sense of dark humor, and I just grew up with that. I thought that's how everybody was. And I've brought it into my work, and it seems to work. I get a lot of letters from people that say this helped me through a tough time because it was able to give me a few smiles.
There's a similar situation in radio stations, TV stations, and newsrooms. There's that type of humor that comes out when things go a little haywire. If you don't understand it, people are looking in from the outside think, how can you say stuff like that? But it's there as well.
Well, and you guys are under pressure because you have to be somber on the air, and then off the air you just need that relief of, oh my goodness, I can't believe how heavy I've had to be. You can almost tell. I did radio for a little while, and I remember that. It's the direness and that you have to put into your voice and your performance, and then finally when you're able to breathe after that, sometimes you can say things you really hope the mic's off. At least that's how I remember it.
And it often is how soon after something like that happens that somebody makes the first joke. That is a coping mechanism.
The first person usually takes a hit, but we need that. We need to remember that in difficult times, people don't lose their sense of humor. And I think we've become oversensitive to. I might say the wrong thing. And sometimes what people need is a grin. I think that's another reason to write these comedies about these dark subjects is that people go into them and think, hey, wait a minute, this resonates with me because of the grief I'm going through, but also because I needed to smile again. Maybe we can take our dark sense of humor out into the world.
Yeah, it does have a cathartic aspect to it. And again, just for those not familiar with the previous book or this one, talk a little bit about how you kind of write this type of story, what's your process, and the characters of it. They are unusual characters, so how do you flesh them out?
Well, I try to always go from the point of view of looking through the character's eyes the way an actor might. So the main character of these books is a beta male, a guy who sort of makes his way with his imagination, which is not really hard for me to do since I make my way with my imagination. And he's a bit of a hypochondriac, and I give him the job of being deaf. So, you just sort of get inside of their heads in that you look through the mask of what would they do and what are they willing to do, what do they want and what are they willing to do to get it, which is one of my great teachers used to tell us about creating characters. And a lot of the characters in these books are drawn from mythology. They're either serving it in that I have a Buddhist nun or a cop or something, or they're characters from mythology. Anubis, the Egyptian god of death and justice, or the Morrigan, which are the Celtic goddesses of the battlefield. So you bring these characters in, and then you give them a personality and put them in a modern world, and it suddenly becomes humorous because there's all these dire, dark Celtic and Egyptian myths that are living in this goofy city with the big orange bridge and all the hills and so forth. So it's a lot of it is compare and contrast, ancient and mythical characters with sort of a modern world, and people, the Celtic death gods keep saying, I hate cars because they keep getting run over. They've never learned to go.
I think Mel Brooks said once, comedy is juxtapositions and contrasts, right? And he knew something about comedy. So you got that in this book, the contrast and juxtaposition of the ancient into the modern.
Yeah, that's. I'd be glad to follow Mel's book any day of the week.
Well, it is a very funny book. It's called Secondhand Souls, the follow-up to Dirty Job. I've been talking with Christopher Moore today. Christopher, give out a website. People can either contact you or get more information on the book.
Yeah, sure. I'm at chrismoore.com. I'm on Twitter at The Author Guy, and Facebook at Christopher Moore. So one of the other of those, you can get everything, all the information you might ever want.
Great. Christopher, pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we can do it again when the next one comes out, but thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles Media.